Ambassador Voris stood on the high observation balcony as the twin suns began their slow rise. He felt a soft breeze on his face, carrying the gentle scent of Aurelia Prime's flowering plains. His heart was light with hope. Today he would welcome a small human envoy, an event he had awaited for weeks. He straightened his robes and checked the cum panel for the 100th time, expecting a polite greeting and a few small ships. Then the scanners blared. A ripple of red light pulsed across. The display! Voris frowned and leaned forward. The panel showed hundreds of bright dots moving fast, each one a vessel larger than the last. His pulse thudded in his ears. He whispered, "This can't be right." In all the council records, humanity had only sent 3 ships before. Never. A fleet this size. He pressed his palms against the cold rail. His mind raced back to the first message from Earth. They had spoken of peaceful talks, of learning their ways and sharing stories. No one ever said they would come like an armada. Voris's chest tightened. Memories surfaced of his first day. In the ambassador training halls, where he learned that fear could twist the truth. He forced himself to breathe slowly, but his visor fogged with sweat. Below him, the starship's crew moved with urgency. Officers dashed to secure data cores and prepare diplomatic codes. Quiet voices whispered about emergency protocols and possible threats. Voris knew he must act quickly. If he hesitated, panic would spread among the council. He tapped his cum badge and called for an urgent hololink with Chancellor Relmer. His voice shook as he spoke. "Chancellor, we have an unannounced human fleet approaching at high speed. I need your guidance." As he waited for the Chancellor's reply, Voris looked out again. The human ships held formation like a great living temple glowing against the black sky. Soft lights danced along each hull, and the whole fleet moved, as if guided by a single hand. It made his stomach flip. He had studied human formations in texts, admired their discipline, but never in such numbers. His pulse raced, and cold dread settled in his bones. A calm voice crackled through his cum. It was Chancellor Relmer, stern and steady. "Stay calm, Ambassador. Open a channel and invite their lead ship to identify its purpose. Assume peace until proven otherwise." Voris nodded, even though the Chancellor could not see him. He pressed a button on the rail, projecting a wide blue connection beam straight toward the largest human vessel. His hands trembled as he formed. The greeting in his mind, "Attention human fleet," Voris began, lifting his voice so that every officer in the room could hear. "This is Ambassador Voris of the Aurelian Council. We welcome you at Aurelia Prime. Please identify your lead vessel and state your purpose." His words felt small in the vast chamber. He fought the urge to step back and hide from the glowing machines before him. As he spoke, the fleet held still. The red dots on the scanner blinked silently. Voris's chest tightened so much that he thought he might faint, yet he kept his eyes on the viewports. He forced himself to stand tall, repeating the Chancellor's calm tone to steady his own fear. His voice echoed softly, "We greet you in peace." In that moment, Voris realized that his own courage might shape the meeting to come. Ask ChatGPT. Ambassador Voris stood with his back to the Grand Council chamber wall. A huge hollow star map glowed in the center. The map showed the human fleet in red. The bright dots formed a line like a river in space. Hundreds of ships moved closer. Delegates sat in curved rows. Each face was lit by concern. He felt his chest tighten. He wondered, what do they want? Fear ran through him. But he held his robe and stood still. Silent whispers spread. Voices rose and fell. The delegates spoke in low tones. One said the fleet was a sign of war. Another said the fleet could be a gift. Their words bounced from wall to wall. The humming of the star map filled the room. Voris watched the faces. He saw eyes of wonder and dread. Some hands pressed on desks. Others fanned their faces. The mood in the room was tense and sad and light with hope. Voris stepped down from the dais. He walked to the side window. The view showed a blue planet far below. He put his hand on the glass. He felt the cold metal frame. He closed his eyes and tried to breathe. He thought of his training days. He remembered a lesson. We face fear with calm. He tried to calm his mind, but his heart pounded. The thought of so many human ships filled him with doubt and awe. He turned to the comm console. His antenna glowed red. He pressed a button and spoke in hushed tones. Chancellor Relmer, the fleet is unannounced. It moves fast and in large numbers. I seek your advice at once. His voice was low and uncertain. He watched the message send. His hands trembled. The console showed message delivered. He swallowed hard and felt his dry throat. He waited under the window, breathing in and out. A soft chime sounded. The reply came. The Chancellor's calm tone spoke across the chamber. Hold steady, Ambassador. Open a clear channel. Greet them with peace. Ask their purpose. Voris felt a small wave of relief. The steady voice of the Chancellor settled his nerves. He pressed another button. A blue beam formed. It aimed at the brightest dot on the screen. He stood tall again and readied to speak. Debate rose again as delegates questioned each other. One older page pressed for shields and weapons. A young judge called for study and peace. Their arguments clashed, but stayed polite. The rising voices sounded like wind in the trees. Some delegates leaned forward. Others crossed their arms. Voris returned to the front. He lifted his head, watched them speak. He felt the weight of his duty more than ever. A young delegate stepped forward. Her voice trembled but was clear. What if the fleet is our chance? What if they come to learn? She looked at Voris with bright eyes. A few delegates nodded. A hopeful murmur ran through the hall. Voris felt tears well up. He thought of his home world. He thought of new friendships. He saw fear melting into trust in the faces around him. He walked back to the holomap. The fleet's red dots had not moved. He closed his eyes for a moment. Again he breathed deep, opened his eyes and stood straight. He felt calm and ready. The council would greet the humans with respect. He placed his hands behind his back and waited for the human voice. His heart was still fast, but now it held hope. Outside the chamber, crew members paused in their tasks. They watched screens and exchanged nervous glances. Many had never seen the human fleet at such scale. Some carried tablets with human art and music clips. They whispered quietly about stories from Earth, tales of heroes and hope. In that quiet moment, Voris realized, his people stood on the cusp of a new future, guided by the chance to learn from strangers. Ambassador Voris felt the heavy silence lift when a gentle human voice filled the grand chamber. He watched the large holographic display as each word formed above the glowing star map. The speaker used the common trade language, one taught in many alien academies since first contact. She announced, I am Captain Alina Reyes of the Earth Starship Horizon, ambassador to Aurelia Prime. Her tone was calm, warm, and sincere. For the first time, fear loosened its tight grip on his chest. Delegates leaned forward, their eyes alive with curiosity. Voris felt a quiet hope bloom inside him. Captain Reyes continued with a steady smile. In her voice, she explained that humanity came in peace. She spoke of shared knowledge in science, art, and medicine. She admitted that the fleet's size reflected Earth's growth and desire to learn, not war. Each word carried honesty, like sunlight through thin clouds. Voris repeated the words in his mind to steady his pulse. He felt gratitude for her calm. The room's tension seemed to soften. The distant suns of Aurelia Prime felt brighter in that moment. It felt like a gentle embrace across the void. The human ambassador named gifts for Aurelia Prime: advanced healing, protocols, clean energy designs, and stories woven in light and sound. She spoke of children's drawings, of music that soothed pain, and of books that held wisdom from many worlds. No mention of weapons or conquest disturbed her voice. Instead, she offered friendship and trust. Voris imagined the gifts arriving. In small cargo shuttles, bright crates of hope. He pictured healers learning new treatments and artists finding fresh inspiration. A warm joy grew in his heart. Across the chamber, delegates shifted in their seats. Some smiled and nodded as they listened. Others murmured in agreement, their fear ebbing away. A few still pressed their hands against holopads, but their bodies relaxed as the human words filled the air. The eldest delegate rose and spoke to her neighbor with a quiet tone. The young page closed his datapad and joined the silent vigil. The council's deep voice boomed with new purpose as it approved an opening for cultural exchange. The air felt lighter, like a breeze after rain. They held their breath, waiting for the next message. Forrest felt tears well in his eyes. He thought of his own children back home, who read early human stories as bedtime tales. He thought of how his people once feared the unknown. Now those fears melted like morning dew. He offered a silent thanks to Captain Reyes and the brave crew of Horizon. His chest was still full of hope and wonder. He could see a future where humans and Aurelians walked side by side under a shared sky, learning together in peace. He felt warmth spread in his chest. Small diplomatic shuttles began to descend toward the council walkway. Voris watched as each craft glowed with soft lights. He heard translators whisper words back and forth across the corridor. Human envoys stepped out, their faces friendly and open. They carried slender cases of gifts tied with simple ribbons. Voris strode forward to greet them with a deep bow. As their hands met, he felt the strength of new friendship. He whispered welcome to Aurelia Prime and meant it from the depths of his soul. By the end of the exchange, the once fearful chamber brimmed with excitement. Delegates discussed future visits, joint research, and shared celebrations. Voris stood between Captain Reyes and Chancellor Relmer, smiling with quiet pride. The great holomap now glowed with soft green lines, marking the first paths of exchange between Earth and Aurelia. Voris looked at the bright dots that had once felt like a threat. Now they were beacons of hope. He realized that fear had given way to trust, and a new era had begun. Soft laughter and murmurs of joy filled the air as old fears faded. Ask ChatGPT. Ambassador Voris stepped onto the human shuttle with a steady breath. He looked at the bright hull of the ship and felt a thrill in his chest. Around him, Aurelian scholars and engineers followed, their eyes wide with wonder. Captain Elena Reyes greeted each guest with a warm smile and open hand. Voris bowed deeply, then rose to see the human crew waiting in neat rows. He felt pride for his people and gratitude for these kindly strangers. Inside the shuttle, the air was cool and softly. Scented, smooth walls curved above the guests like a protective shell. Soft lights glowed along the floor, guiding each step. Voris ran his fingers along a polished rail and thought of the rocky cliffs on Aurelia Prime. He felt a mix of homesickness and awe. A young Aurelian scientist named Laresh gasped as she saw living plants growing in glass tubes. She whispered, "They bloom without sun." A human botanist knelt beside her and explained, "We mimic sun with gentle lights and care." Larisha's eyes filled with hope this knowledge could save whole forests on her world, in the main lab. A group of Aurelian healers met Earth doctors. Voris watched as a healer laid her palm on a wounded creature's leg. A human medic knelt, too, placing a clear gel on a small cut. The gel pulsed with light and closed the wound in seconds. Soft gasps filled the room. The Aurelian healer touched her own wrist in wonder. "Your science heals so fast," she said, voice thick. The human smiled kindly. "We learned to blend our old ways with new tools," she replied. Voris felt tears pinch his eyes. He thought of families on Aurelia Prime who could now live without fear of loss. Nearby, an art exchange began in a glowing gallery. Human artists displayed floating sculptures made of light and sound. Aurelian painters unrolled cloths of glowing ink. One piece showed Aurelia's twin sons in gentle pink and gold. A human musician played a soft tune on a wind harp. His notes drifted through the air, the paintings shimmered in time. Both artists placed hands on each other's work, feeling a bond beyond words. Voris watched, heart warm, as colors and music wove together like new threads in a shared tapestry. Later, in a cozy lounge, human children and Aurelian young ones sat in circles. A human teacher held a small holotablet showing dancing shapes. The children laughed and tried to mimic the shapes in their own signs. An Aurelian child named Marin taught the human kids how to spin a toy top with her 3 fingers. They all giggled as the top danced on the floor. Voris leaned against a wall, smiling at the pure joy. He felt the weight of his earlier fear drift away, replaced by simple happiness. At a long table beneath a mural of stars, Aurelian and human delegates shared a meal. Soft bread steamed in gentle waves. Sweet fruit glowed with inner light. Delegates passed dishes and tasted each sample with curiosity. A human diplomat nodded and said, "This tastes like hope." An Aurelian judge tapped his cup and added, "And it feels like friendship." The room filled with quiet laughter. Vorus raised his own cup of warm tea and thought of how far they had come in so short a time. When the tour ended, the guests returned. To Aurelia Prime on graceful shuttles, Vorus walked beside Captain Reyes as they watched the blue planet grow near. He felt a spark of excitement for the projects to come. Soon labs would open, gardens would bloom, and stories would fill both worlds. He promised himself to honor this moment of trust forever. That evening, under the glow of Aurelia's twin moons, Ambassador Vorus stood alone by the landing platform. He closed his eyes and took a deep breath of cool night air. His heart swelled. With hope, the day's exchange had shown him that two worlds could learn from each other with kindness and wonder. He lifted his gaze to the stars where the human fleet waited. In that silver light, he smiled quietly. A new chapter was beginning for Aurelia, for Earth, and for all who dared to reach across the void. Ambassador Vorus entered the bright council hall with light steps. Sunlight streamed through tall windows, painting the floor in gold. He felt both pride and a flutter of nerves. Today he would present his plan for the Celestial Exchange Commission. He remembered the first fearful moment he saw the human fleet. Now he stood calm before his peers, ready to build a shared future. He stepped onto the dais and spoke in a clear voice. "Honored delegates, I propose we form the Celestial Exchange Commission. Together with our human friends, we will share knowledge in healing, energy, and the arts. We will learn from each other, grow side by side, and face the challenges of the universe as allies." His words echoed softly in the hushed chamber. Some delegates leaned forward, intrigued. Others folded their arms, wary of change. An elder rose and said, "But what of our traditions? We must protect Aurelian culture." Vorus nodded, understanding their care. He answered gently, "This commission will respect our ways. We will add human knowledge without replacing what makes Aurelia unique. We will keep our stories, our songs, our history safe." A younger delegate, her eyes bright, spoke next. "I have seen the human healers work on our wounded animals. I have tasted their sweet fruit, not harm." A ripple of agreement passed through the room. Vorus felt warmth spread in his chest. Small smiles appeared on many faces. He paused, letting their words settle. Then he called for the vote. Crystals above each seat glowed as delegates placed their choice. The lights turned soft green. The motion passed. A wave of relief and joy washed over the hall. Vorus's eyes stung with happy tears. The commission was real. Within days, work groups formed. Aurelian engineers and human builders drew plans for a shared academy. Botanists and ecologists met in labs, planning how to revive dying forests on Aurelia Prime. Artists and musicians wrote new songs blending to worlds. Every day, new ideas bloomed like the flowers of spring. In the gardens outside the academy site, human and Aurelian volunteers planted seeds together. They knelt in the warm earth, their fingers brushing as they placed each seed. A human gardener taught Aurelian children how to tend the soil. The children laughed as bright sprouts appeared in glass domes. Vorus passed by and felt his heart lift. Hope took root here too. News of their work spread across the planet. Towns held small festivals to celebrate the new alliance. People dressed in bright robes and waved flags of blue and green. They shared bread and sweet fruit, singing songs taught by human minstrels. Laughter and music filled marketplaces where once only trade had passed. One evening, Vorus returned home under a sky full of stars. His spouse, Larina, greeted him at the door with open arms. Their children ran forward, shouting, "Father, Father, tell us of the academy." Vorus lifted them both and spun around. He smiled as they giggled, their faces lit by love and expectation. Later, he stepped outside onto his balcony. He looked up at the tiny specks of light far above the human ships held in orbit as guardians of peace. He felt gratitude swell in his heart. His fear had turned to friendship. What once seemed like an army of strangers was now a fleet of allies. In the calm night, Ambassador Vorus whispered to the stars, "We had courage, and we found hope." And in the quiet sky, the lights shone back, bright with promise. Ambassador Vorus woke before dawn and walked across the dew-wet grass toward the field site. Today, the first joint expedition from the Celestial Exchange Commission would test New Forest. Healing seeds in the Malarian woods, he felt a flutter of pride and a touch of nerves. Human ecologists and Aurelian botanists had worked for weeks in lab glasshouses. Now, under pale morning light, they would plant the seeds together. As he reached the edge of the trees, he saw soft lanterns hung on slender trunks, guiding them inward. The team moved in a quiet line through mossy undergrowth. Human scientist Dr. Mara Kim carried a crate of slender glass pods, each holding a sprouting seed. Aurelian botanist Larish followed close behind, her three-fingered hand brushing ferns. Birds whispered overhead, and a cool breeze stirred nervous excitement. Vorus watched as they knelt on soft soil. Dr. Kim explained in gentle tones how each pod would open when light and moisture were right. Larish listened with bright eyes, imagining forests renewed. As they planted the first seeds, dark clouds gathered above. Sudden wind rattled leaves and sent small branches arcing down. Vorus's heart leapt. The storm could wash away all their work. He called out calmly, "Secure the pods under the mesh tents." Young Aurelian students scurried to help. Human engineers and Aurelian builders worked side by side, fastening clear covers over each planting station. Water ran in small rivulets, but they dug trenches to guide it away. The hiss of rain filled the air, but hope held firm in their hands. Under the makeshift shelters, the group pressed close. Dr. Kim held Larish's hand as they checked each pod. Vorus stood nearby, offering soft words of encouragement. A sudden crack of thunder made them jump, but they did not falter. One by one, they saw tiny sprouts push through the soil inside the pods. The sight brought quiet gasps. Larish wiped a tear from her cheek and smiled at Dr. Kim. In that moment, Aurelian and human hearts beat together, bound by shared wonder. When the storm eased, golden light filtered through broken clouds. The team emerged and wiped rain from their robes. Each glass pod held a green promise still safe. A cheer rose soft at first, then steady. Vorus felt tears well in his eyes. He stepped forward and placed a hand on a pod as if to bless it. "Today," he said, voice clear and warm, "we have shown what friendship can do." Around him, engineers and students nodded, their faces bright with joy. Later, by a circle of smooth stones, they held a simple ceremony. Dr. Kim offered a human prayer of thanks. Larish recited an Aurelian blessing of growth. They planted a special seed together in open ground. The first joint tree would stand as a living symbol of their alliance. Vorus draped a ribbon of blue and green silk around its young trunk. Soft music drifted from hidden speakers, earth tunes and Aurelian wind harp sounds woven in harmony. As they returned to the academy shuttle, townsfolk gathered at the forest edge. Children waved handmade flags, and parents offered bread sweetened with glowing fruit. Laughter echoed across the clearing. A human engineer lifted an Aurelian child onto his shoulders so she could see their new tree. Vorus smiled at the scene. Once fearful faces now shone with shared pride. The seed-planting expedition had become a festival of hope for all. That evening, Ambassador Vorus stood alone on his balcony under a sky full of silent stars. He thought of the fleet that once frightened him, of council halls that buzzed with doubt, and of today's field of green glass pods. His heart swelled with gratitude for courage, trust, and unity. He whispered to the night, "We have sown more than seeds today. We have sown friendship." In the quiet dark, the lights of human ships twinkled like distant lanterns, promising new life across the void. Ambassador Vorus arrived at the grand arch of the new Celestial Exchange Academy. The white marble walls glowed in the soft dawn light. He felt a flutter of excitement and pride. Beside him, Captain Alina Reyes walked with a calm smile. were both dressed in simple robes that mixed Aurelian patterns with Earth designs. Students and scholars from both worlds lined the walkway, holding flowers of blue petals and glowing earth blossoms. Their faces were bright with hope. Boris paused and took a deep breath of fresh morning air. He felt tears of joy well in his eyes. Today marked the first step of a shared journey. They reached the central hall where a gentle crowd waited. Boris stood at a wooden podium carved by Aurelian artisans. Rhea stood at his side. She nodded, and then Boris spoke in a clear, warm voice. "Honored friends from Earth and Aurelia, welcome to this place of learning and unity. Here, we will grow, together in knowledge and friendship." His words carried across the silent hall. A wave of applause rose, soft at first and then steady. He saw scholars wipe away tears. Children laughed as they saw the flags of two worlds dancing above their heads. After the speeches, Boris and Reyes led a tour of the new halls. In the healing labs, Aurelian and human medics showed miracle cures that blended ancient plant extracts. With earth nanotech patches, Boris watched a young Aurelian apprentice heal a wounded bird under a human doctor's guidance. The bird chirped and fluttered its wings, content and safe. In the art rooms, students mixed colors that glowed in the dark, painting murals of stars and forests. Music drifted from a practice hall where humans and Aurelians learned each other's songs. Boris felt his heart warm as he saw trust and wonder in every face. At midday, he found a quiet garden courtyard. His own children, Lorena and Kovis, sat beneath a glass dome studying a hollow scroll. Lorena pointed at the floating letters and turned to her brother with a giggle. Kovis traced earth symbols in the soft grass. Boris knelt beside them and wrapped his arms around both. He whispered, "This is for your future." Lorena smiled and leaned her head on his shoulder. Kovis held his small hand and said, "Father, this school is our bridge to the stars." Boris pressed a kiss to each head. His chest swelled with love and hope. Before sunset, Boris and Reyes joined proud families and delegates in the main plaza. 2 long ribbons, one blue and one green, stretched between 2 columns. With a gentle pull, they cut the ribbons, and the gate swung open. Cheer rose so loud it shook the nearby flagpoles. Students poured into the academy grounds, chattering and singing. Boris looked at Reyes and bowed his head in thanks. She offered him a hand, and they walked down the steps together as the crowd cheered. When the day ended, Boris stood alone on his balcony, overlooking the academy gardens. The twin moons of Aurelia Prime rose, casting soft silver light on the new buildings. He held a small crystal from the first seed planting, now glowing with warmth. Above, the human fleet sailed in silent orbit, their lights like tiny stars around the planet. Boris whispered to the night sky, "We began with fear and grew into hope. Now we stand as friends, learning from one another." In that quiet moment, he felt the promise of a bright future, a future built not with weapons, but with kindness, curiosity, and the power of 2 worlds united. Walked inside, finding his home filled with light. His spouse Lorena stood by the window, smiling. She offered him tea. They sat together, talking about the wonders. As they looked at a hollow projection of stars, Boris felt at peace. He knew this was the beginning of an adventure. Ask ChatGPT.